Good? Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Cecil Pendergrass, Chairman of the Lee County Commission, and thank you for your patience through this process. We've all been very devastated the last 4 days after Ian hit our area. Today, I signed another state of emergency for another 7 days of emergency management for Lee County. That gives our county manager and authority to work with all the other agencies within the state and the federal government. I'd like to report to all 4 hospitals reporting open and normal conditions today to all the hospitals through Lee County. We have some circumstances in Lee County that is not normal, though. That is Sanibel and Pine Island, access to those roads and those islands. And those residents, we are concerned about their safety and also the recovery of the people that are still there and the victims. Coast Guard will still continue to bring water to those areas and for a short-term mission. As the governor announced yesterday, 500 National Guardsmen will be deployed to Lee County as of today to provide security for the barrier islands of Pine Island, Matlacha, and for Sanibel and Captiva. They will be here until we have law and order. We will continue to have law and order in Lee County to protect property. We have a short-term plan in place to replacing the Pine Island Road going into Pine Island and Matlacha. That will be done in a short term. That's being finalized now with FDOT, Florida Department of Transportation. That will give access to Lee County emergency services and all the contractors and for the residents to get on and off the island. Meanwhile, we urge the residents that are still there to use our resources to leave the islands until we come everything back to normal within Pine Island and Sanibel. We work with those city agencies. There's a plan in place. Next, I'd like to introduce Ben Siegel, who is our airport executive director. Some good news from RSW.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Ben Siegel with the airport. As you know, our airport's runways open within 24 hours after the storm to support military rescue and humanitarian efforts. Since then, we've been coordinating efforts to get the airport open for commercial operations, and I'm pleased to let everybody know that effective on October 5th, Wednesday, we'll be opening the airport for limited commercial operations. And what that means is that, we're going to have some, our community is going to be able to start traveling in and out of the airport on a limited basis. I just ask that everybody be patient when they're going through the airport. It's not going to be the same airport that you see that you're used to seeing. We're going to have limited concessions, food and beverage, but we're going to be doing the best we can to take care of all of our travelers that come through the airport. The rental cars will be open. Our parking lots, of course, will be open. And this will be a slow rollout. Our challenges have been staffing, and we deal and coordinate with a lot of different agencies and companies to make all this happen. We've tested all of our equipment and all of our systems. They are all working properly, and we're ready to go. But we're going to have to just roll this out on a slow, a limited basis, and we're hoping to get to full operations as soon as we can. So thank you.
Thank you, Ben, for that update. One thing I also like to stress is to residents, I said it yesterday, hopefully be patient. I know in some parts of the county it looks like everything's back to normal. Publix is open, people are shopping, some restaurants are open. But remember, we still have over 400 traffic signals down in Lee County that are not operational. So we urge residents still to stay home as much as possible. As of today, after signing another 7 days state of emergency, the county offices will remain closed for operational. But behind the scenes, those county employees are here working, as you see behind you here in the EOC. So Public Works, DOT, EMS, all the employees are working 24/7 right now. But the public access buildings, because we have some damage, some water intrusion, those offices will remain closed for another week. I'm here today with my colleagues, Ray Sandelli, and next will be Roger DeJarlais to bring you up to date on some county issues.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to just make some sort of general announcements about services that are being provided and some of the actions that are being taken today. Food and water, which is free food and water, are at points of distribution, which are areas around the county. Right now there are 6, and I believe there'll be another 5 or 6 more that will be established by the State Department of Emergency Management. And you can find a map of those distribution points on the Lee County website. They opened at 8 o'clock on Saturday morning, and the first day there were 35,000 residents who were served. And as you might imagine, given that it was only a couple days into the response and recovery period, that they, the pods ran out of water fairly early on. But They are being resupplied every day, sometimes during the day, and then sometimes not until after hours. So we have supplies staged here, and we'll continue to replenish those pods. You can walk up to the pods, you can drive up to the pods, but for safety reasons, while we have traffic control with law enforcement and the National Guard, we would prefer that people get in line with their cars and drive in, and it's a very efficient process with the National Guard helping to put flats of water and food into everyone's trunks. We continue with our shelter operations, although we're beginning to pare those down. We have about 1,700 people still in shelters. We started out with about 4,000 the day following landfall of the storm, but we're down about 1,700, and so we'll be closing some of those shelters and consolidating into Hertz Arena, as many as we can. And we're working on the mix of special needs sheltering and general population sheltering. So please be patient as we continue to work that out. I want to remind people, the chairman asked for patience, and we do. We're asking for patience. And remember, this is day 4. This is only day 4 of the response effort, and we will be very shortly be moving into the recovery phase of this storm. Just so a reminder, we do have still lots of capacity in the shelters. Tomorrow, we will open 4 sites where residents can take vegetative debris or construction demolition debris if their homes have been flooded and all of their furniture and belongings are ruined. They can take all of that to these 4 sites. If they're unable or don't want to do that, put it out by the curb. And we have our contract debris removal service that will be by in cycle after cycle after cycle until we get it all. Regular trash pickup will resume tomorrow. Please don't put out your recycling yet. We're not quite ready. But regular trash pickup in all zones in Lee County will start back up tomorrow. The power, of course, which is on everyone's mind, is being restored at a fairly rapid pace. FP&L reports that a little better than 50% of their customers in Lee County now have power at their homes. Lee County Electric Co-op, they are moving along at a pace. They had more damage at their switching stations, I think, than FP&L did, and so they have about 17% of their customers that have been repowered as of this afternoon. A reminder about generators. Happens every storm. People, they get generators and they will place them in the wrong spot, whether it's under a window that's opened and the monoxide fumes gather in the house. It's incredibly dangerous. And every time we have a storm activation, there are fatalities as a result. We remind people, have those generators at least 10 feet away from your home, at least, for safety reasons that are pretty obvious. So the chairman mentioned transportation to the islands, and if we've got Fort Myers Beach, Pine Island, and Sanibel are the islands of primary concern. So let's start with Pine Island. We have been working with the State Department of Transportation, and I think we're fairly close to a plan that will provide temporary bridging at the site that has failed in Matlacha. That will hopefully, we will see results within, I would say within the next 10 days. And hopefully sooner than that. There's still some details to be worked out. No matter who does that bridge, and it doesn't matter how big an emergency it is, we still have to get permits from the Army Corps of Engineers and Department of Environmental Protection. Having said that, I've spoken to federal people in Washington, and you need to know that Lee County has become a high priority in not just the White House, but in Congress and the governor's office and the state legislature, given the extent of the damage that we have experienced. So that's Pine Island. There are rumors that people are spreading, and this happens every storm that I've ever worked in my career. Someone or a group will begin to talk about Lee County is ignoring you, FEMA is ignoring you, and we want to kick you off your island. I got to tell you, that's not the case, and I'm losing patience with it. Not that I can do anything about it, but I'm losing patience. Nobody's kicking anyone off any island. In fact, we can't do that by law, even if we thought it was a really good idea. What we can do is we can strongly suggest that people should leave those islands if we can't help support them. People need to have electricity, they need to have water, they need to have food. Well, until we've got really, proper transportation to and from those islands, it's incredibly difficult and costly to provide food, and it's not sustainable. It doesn't matter who does it. So, we encourage people, if you can, if you feel comfortable and you have a place to go, secure your property and leave the island if you have a place to go and you're comfortable with it. That's Pine Island. Fort Myers Beach, of course, we all know, you've seen if you haven't been there, you've seen the video. Fort Myers Beach has been decimated. It really looks like a war zone down there. We strongly encourage people to leave Fort Myers Beach. If you have property that is still standing, visit your property, take the belongings, things that are personal to you if you can, and leave the island if you have some place to stay. Staying on Fort Myers Beach right now is actually dangerous. There are power lines down everywhere, even though the grid has been de-energized. But there are water line breaks, there are sewer line breaks. It is a public safety hazard. And because of the damage at Fort Myers Beach, and because there were so many people who refused to leave, we're uncertain about fatalities. Everyone's asking that question, and we simply don't have a number yet that I would consider to be reliable. We have a number. It's likely to go up, but it's impossible to say. And to have a lot of people milling around while rescue efforts or recovery efforts are underway is unhealthy for everyone, and it impedes the response in recovery efforts. So if you head south out of Fort Myers Beach, you can't even get to Bonita Springs now because we have bridges that have been damaged to the point that they're not passable. They've been closed. Whether or not we're going to have to completely rebuild a couple of those bridges is still undetermined. I'm feeling fairly certain that Little Carlos Pass will require a new bridge.
Which one?
Little Carlos Bridge. And then Big Carlos, which is planned for replacement anyway next year. We start that project. Has additional damage to it, but we're talking with engineers, and perhaps with some fairly minor repair work, we might be able to open one lane. But to and from Bonita Springs, from the beach, from the south end, is just not a viable option right now. So really, as a practical matter, there's only one way on and off, and that's the that's the Matanzas Pass Bridge. And then, who did I leave off? I'm sorry?
The Causeway.
Oh, Causeway, yeah, Sanibel. So the Sanibel Causeway, you all know that bridge failed in 5 places. And it is at either end of the bridges and the approaches, and you know that those collapsed. In conversation with the Florida Department of Transportation, we are being told that they are finishing up an engineering study, and we're still working out the details, but the FDOT will begin to do a design build project to replace all of the broken sections of the bridge. How long it's going to take, I couldn't say. We just don't know yet. Again, let's remember it's only day 4. We need to give them some time, and people, please be patient. But I mean, that's actually pretty good news. All of these projects that we have to do are going to add up to the hundreds of millions of dollars. And Lee County does not have a bottomless well of money. Everything we do, we have to be very careful and follow the FEMA guidelines in order to be reimbursed by the federal government. So far, we're in a category where FEMA will reimburse Lee County for 100% of our costs for the next 30 days. We are trying to work with FEMA and other officials in Washington to get that 30-day period extended to 120 days. We can't determine all of our costs and spend over the next 30 days is simply not possible. And so we're hopeful that we'll receive some consideration that way. So that's good news for Sanibel. The chairman mentioned that the governor authorized 500 National Guardsmen to be deployed to Lee County for security in the barrier islands. We don't know the exact day of deployment. I know they're in town, and there are reconnaissance taking place on the islands, but the actual deployment has not yet been announced. And so, last but not least, pets. University of Florida is deploying a mobile veterinary clinic to assist with medical needs of displaced pets. Our animal control officers are actively in Fort Myers Beach area and surrounding areas for recovery, and we're mobilizing recovery efforts in the Pine Island area as well. We will be setting up food distribution sites for pet owners on an as-need basis. And, we'd like to thank all of you who've done it in the media. You've done a really great job of helping us to disseminate this information. You all catch a lot of grief for the way things are reported sometimes, but in fact, we can't do this without you. So you need to know that we appreciate your help. My mistake, I misspoke. It is the Big Hickory Pass Bridge that will need to be rebuilt, not Little Carlos. I misspoke, so if you'd help correct that, please. And so I'll turn it back to the chairman, and if you have some questions, we'll be happy to answer.
Thank you, Roger. As you see, this is every day, this is an evolving motion we have going on here with Lee County. Everything's happening. There's so much going on behind the scenes here at EOC, and there's so much activity, and there's good things coming out of it, and again, there's tragic. Where, the number the sheriff today reported, I think we have, the sheriff reported 42 deaths. And that's something I've never seen in my 38 years of public safety here in Lee County in service. And it's unfortunate, and our hearts and prayers are right with those families. Our thoughts are with those families that lost everything. Those people that can't even go to their home. We have employees here working today that have not been in their homes since the storm hit because they can't get there. They can't get across the bridge because there's no bridge to get to. So we understand that, and our staff's working really hard. So this time we're taking any questions.
So many questions. Starting with numbers, evacuation numbers. How many do you know have been evacuated from Pine Island, from Sanibel, from the far out islands, the unbridged? Do you have ballpark figures?
So I know the number from a couple of days ago, total for Lee County. Our shelter's tucking a little bit over 5,000 this storm, over 5,000.
I beg your pardon. I mean like rescue. How many
Oh, rescued.
people walked off with helicopters or taken out in boats or the dramatics?
Sandra, do you have that number?
So many of the teams that are in county right now are from the federal government, so they are taking track of those numbers. So we've requested to be able to receive that data.
They're not yet.
So we don't have a specific number right now. We know our own search and rescue teams locally here, so we know it's in the thousands of people that have been evacuated. Yes, but as soon as we have a solid number, we can share that.
How long will that operation go on? Just until you're sure nobody else is there?
Well, I was on Fort Myers Beach
Who wants to leave?
last night with the Urban Search and Rescue, and they're going to go house to house, building to building on those barrier islands, Fort Myers Beach, Sanibel, Captiva, until every house is checked. And each house is placard when they leave, showing which house has been checked, and then anybody either survivors recovered or victims. So those numbers will be totaled at the end. We will know house to house per address, whether they break it down into zones, of say the beach, for example. Gage, you've been out there at the beach this week. You saw what happened in Leonardo Arms and everywhere else, and it's just devastating. Some address you probably can't even find because there's no buildings left. So they're going around, they are checking. But they're going to go to everyone's, and that's why, like last night, the action was taken at Fort Myers Beach, so they can get in there and do their job without having the distraction of people coming around, looting and walking around the area while they're trying to recover people.
And you mentioned there are multiple agencies partnering. Who all is doing the searching and rescuing?
So we have a number of federal search and rescue teams that are here deployed. All of our deployments are run through the State Emergency Operations Center. We have Florida search and rescue teams, urban search and rescue teams as well, combined with our local law enforcement, fire departments. So we join together. Exactly. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Thank you. Gage?
For the people at home, there's a lot of folks at home that are, not able to watch but listening on the radio. describe the conditions that these search and rescue teams and teams across the county are dealing with. You know, people might not be able to see this, but describe what they're dealing with.
Well, it's very unique. Like for the example, Orange Beach, a lot of wood structures. So you have a lot of debris, nails sticking up, aluminum. Some areas are flat, and some areas are piles 10 feet deep of wood. You know, you've seen it yourself down there. It's very dangerous to walk around. Like our county manager said, Roger said that there's power lines down. It's kind of weird to see power lines laying around the ground, everybody walking on them. We don't know they're not activated, but you have those conditions, raw sewage, and there still could be human remains there. And for the dignity of the people, we need to make sure they're recovered, and for the dignity of the people.
Can you talk a little bit about, so like the chatter going on Pine Island right now, a lot of people don't want to leave, right? So these rescue crews are running into these issues that residents don't want to leave. A big reason why they don't want to leave is that they're afraid they're not going to be able to get back onto the island. Can you promise these people that at some point when it's safe, when you make that, you know, bridge, that makeshift bridge that you guys are going to make onto Pine Island, that they will be able to return to their home?
Yes, on Pine Island and Sanibel and Captiva, people will be able to return to their homes, get belongings, and obviously they're going to have to meet their insurance adjusters there. They're going to have to get recordings of what happened so they can file their insurance claims. And we're obviously going to make those conditions for people to get there. And it may be case by case. It depends on what kind of road structure we have, for how much travel, how many cars we can get across there a day. It's going to be limited at first until the primary future structure is built. But we will be able to get people back and forth. It will not be a daily routine, though. I will tell you that for the first few weeks, so because it's going to be done in a very organized manner, so it's safe for everybody.
County Manager, you were saying we could see some sort of passable way to get onto Pine Island within 10 days?
That's possible. That is the goal, and it's not impossible. You know, you'd be surprised how fast you can actually build a bridge if you can get rid of, you know, a lot of the bureaucracy, and that's where we are. The federal and state agencies who have to give the permits, you know, our project goes right to the very top of the stack. You know, if we want to build a bridge next week, without this kind of a storm condition, we'd submit our application along with the other hundreds of thousands of applications that they've received. So it's just we get that special attention. You know, the actual construction project itself, that's the easiest part of the project. Yes, ma'am.
As far as water, I know you guys were dealing with some broken pipes. What's the situation looking like to restoring water into homes?
So the Lee County utility systems, the areas for which we were responsible, as of fairly early yesterday, we started building pressure back into the system. I know that last night at about 11 o'clock, we had about 45 pounds of pressure, and we're inching it up slowly till we get in the water mains to just about 80 pounds of pressure. And along the way, as you might imagine, with the shifting grounds, the higher the pressure goes, the more leaks we find. And so once we'll keep inching it up, and the goal is to not do it so fast that we blow the system out again, lose all the pressure, because it takes days to build back up. In the city of Fort Myers, they have much more pressure now than they had just a couple days ago. They had an issue with getting full power to their treatment plant, so they were operating at about 70% capacity. I understand they're doing much better today. So Cape Coral, I think, Cape Coral's doing well. I think they're back to just about full capacity.
And the big question a lot of people have, as you say, we're on day 4, a lot of people may not have been able to shower or run off for many days. Is this water that you're getting to Lee County utility customers, is it safe for showering but maybe not drinking and cooking yet? Is that what we're hearing?
There's still a boil water order, but I'm showering in it.
I'll respond to that real quick. So, one thing I want people to understand, so I think a lot of people are learning, I've talked to a lot of residents this week, they're learning that where they live. A lot of people don't realize that they live in Cape Coral, they're not on Lee County water, they think if they live in the city of Fort Myers, they're on Lee County water. So we have all the different water systems throughout the county. If you live in the city of Fort Myers, Cape Coral, Lehigh, Bonita Springs has their own utility company. So I think everybody's learning, and you're helping us get that message out that you can shower your water, you can use the water. I just wouldn't consume it. If you have an open cut, I wouldn't use it if you're in Lee County. Now, for the city of Fort Myers, other utilities, we're not speaking for them. So people have to understand where they live and who their actual water utility company is to see that. But I've talked to our utility personnel today. Hopefully by midweek, Wednesday maybe, even Tuesday, we'll be off the boil water notice within Lee County facilities, Lee County. So again, if you live in Cape Coral, that's the city of Cape Coral, and Fort Myers is the city of Fort Myers. So it's a different agency though.
The Sanibel Causeway Bridge, we heard the mayor say that the island might not be inhabitable until sometime next year. That bridge, so yourself, sustained 5 major issues or breakaways there, points of failure, we'll call them, right? How much of an undertaking? Talk about the scope of rebuilding this massive structure and making it safe for all of us to go to our little piece of paradise. Talk about how intense that is.
Well, the county manager touched on that about the government regulation. Usually if you go into Army Corps permitting for something like that, you're looking at 5 to 7 years. The good thing is, if you look in this room here, we have men and women here today from Army Corps here on the ground from D.C. They're wearing the white shirts with the red logos on them, and that's what's helping. I was crystal clear when I spoke to the President of the United States that called me the other day. We need your help now. We need to work together as a state and local. We need to help the federal government to build these bridges back. And I think with what Roger said, the county manager, that between working with the state and the federal government, we're going to get that permitting and the authority to do those bridges as soon as possible. You're going to see a whole different process. We've had accidents on I-75 before that's tanker fires or something. You covered them before where the lanes are gone, and they within a day or two they rebuild the interstate. It's not the same as a bridge, because those islands between the causeway, there's going to be a lot of beach renourishment there, a lot of sand being moved back. That's be costly and it's time consuming. But the main part is not having to go through the years of permitting to get that done.
And I know, my final question, sorry. I know there's a lot of different teams, local to the federal level working together. And like you said, unfortunately, this death toll will likely increase. What is the current reliable number that the county is working with as of now?
I would hate to represent to you a number that I'm not certain of. And so and even to the caveat of a reliable number, I think it's safe to say we're in the double digits, less than 50, but the real reliable number, we just don't have it yet. Okay?
I like that. Yeah,
Just
go ahead.
speaking of things that people are saying behind the scenes, and even the New York Times, there's the question about how we calculated the evacuations. And I know we have a very carefully crafted plan, and there's a lot of discussion about whether we followed our own excellent plan. Can you speak to that? Yes,
and thank you for asking that question, because we did. The cone 72 hours before the storm, we still were not in the cone. Lee County wasn't. So the state emergency director said that we noticed that locally we were working off of data and went off that data. The problem is you all covered the storms before. We've actually been in the cone and people still like, I rotted out. I was here for Charlie. I was here for Irma. No problem. This is a windstorm. Everything's fine. And people get callous to that. And we have a lot of people moved here in the last 5 years that's never been through a hurricane. And they just say, it's no big deal. They forget about the force of water. This storm is totally different than any other storm because the angle it came into, it was the worst case scenario to come into. Myself and like Roger's being here all our lives, we always knew this is the worst case scenario. If a storm came in from the Gulf of Mexico 1 degree north of the Caloosahatchee with a surge on the right side of the storm, that'd be the worst thing for the Barrier Islands. And it happened that way. And people were told, and I understand some people may not have the provisions to leave, but we had the resources here to provide for people if they needed transportation. We had that. We saw that in Katrina years ago. Buses were sitting there empty, and people didn't leave.
And we told people in time.
We asked them, mandatory A was one day, the next day B was effective, which is more inland. When people saw B being evacuated, mandatory evacuation, the people in A, now looking back, Monday morning quarterbacking, but they should look forward and say, you know what, I need to go. If the people behind me is being told to leave, why am I still sitting here front and center? So they didn't leave. I respect their choices, but I'm sure a lot of them regret it now. So I'd like to do one thing is thank all my colleagues and all our employees here working this last 4 days. My colleagues, the County Commission, Commissioner Sanibel, would you like to say a few words?
Just one comment. We talked a lot about technical expertise and everything. I'm standing here and looking out into the EOC, and I see a number of people in uniform. Those are family members. They were there yesterday at the distribution points. We're talking about security on the islands. Take the time to simply say thank you to them. They're away from their families. They're serving our country. They're serving our communities. And a simple thank you means a great deal to them. So as a veteran, it's appreciated.
Thank you. Any other questions? We'll be hearing from us, I'm sure, again this week. We have a message.